The trickiest thing about adding a footer div with a clear style, which is a common way to solve this problem in CSS of floating divs and not floating divs not always lining up the way you want, the tricky part is to get your div in the right place. So remember, I left this placeholder text here for a reason, and if we go back to split screen, I also have my little comment about this is the close for div. And that's helpful because now I want to create a new div that is after all 4 of those image divs and before the end of my container div. Because remember, I want all of my content inside my container. So with my cursor after the last closed div, which is for family, and before the closed div for container, I can choose to insert another div, and I'm going to call this one footer. And that's almost all the divs we have to insert, I promise. And now I want to create a style for my footer div, so I'm going to add that to the end of my list of styles over here. I want to make sure that my footer div is selected, and a good way to do that is always to use the tag selector. If you want to make sure you've really selected a div, I want to create a new style. Again, I don't need to be so specific as to define this within the container, but I want the style for the footer now to first have a green background like the top. Now I can't see my banner, so that's going to be a little tricky, so I'll add that in a moment. But I also want it to have the text align center that we've been doing, so that when I put all my navigation links in the footer, they'll be centered on the page. I'm going to add some padding to this so that I get a little spacing around everything in the footer. And now here's the trick that will move this footer to the bottom of the screen. Clear both. What that setting does when you create a style is force whatever that's applied to clear both sides left and right before it displays. When I click OK, you should see the effect. Notice now I've got a footer here that's forcing my content div to go all the way to the bottom of the page below my image divs. And remember, I wanted that green color from the banner, so I can go back and add that. Let me just switch back to design so I have a little more space to work here. I want this color at the bottom the same as at the top. So I can select my footer, double-click, and just add that background color. You can always change a style again after you've created it, or add more elements simply by double-clicking on the name of the style in the CSS panel and adding the change. So now when I scroll down, you see I have a nice green footer here that is both forcing my container to surround all of my content and giving me a nice green box to put my navigation links in. So let's save what we've done so far. Remember, I always say, save early and often. Now that we've got all of the content elements on this page, I think we can finally delete our ID for container goes here line. And let's go ahead and preview this in a browser. Save, come up here, and let's start with Firefox. So you can see we're starting to make progress. We've got all 4 of our images side by side now, and we've got the text underneath them placed with them. We've got our footer where we want it. And we're going to add some styles now to put borders around the edge of this, to turn these into links the way we want them to look. And one other little trick I'll go ahead and do now. Here at the bottom, you see this green bar ends, and you get the blue background behind it. When I showed this to Robin, she said, you know, I really want that green bar to go down the page so that I don't see the blue, so that it fills the whole screen. And I'll tell you, she was looking at it on a Macintosh, and I was looking at it on a PC set for 800 by 600. So I switched over to my Mac, and I saw what you see here, this big gap at the bottom. And this is a good lesson in the difference between Mac and PC, because on a PC, optimized for the 800 by 600 screen, it looked about like that. But on her computer, on the Mac, this blue bar went way down below in a way that looked very odd to her. So a little trick I came up with for that one was just to extend the size of this green box so that on a bigger monitor, that green box would just keep going down the page. So if I double click again on footer, and I go into the box styling, I don't have a width set because the container is setting the width. But if I set the height of this to something absurd like 2000, this isn't going to change anything above the footer. But now you see that green box goes on forever, so, or at least seemingly forever. So no matter how big somebody's monitor is, that green should continue to appear all the way down to the bottom of the page.